because it's good policy, and we didn't support the changes when they were introduced in 2007 by Howard to make the pension system less fair, and we had an opportunity to make it fairer. So it was a good outcome for people. It's one of the very few areas that the government's got right in terms of its budget. We also managed to get this retirement income review, which we think is really important. It puts superannuation back on the table. We agree with Labor that superannuation tax concessions need to be looked at. We've got a costed plan on that as well. So I think it's a good outcome.
Labor says you've been dudded by Scott Morrison and the government, that they argue that the government has no intention, and the government has said this, of looking at superannuation concessions.
Well, a couple of things there. I have to say I was really surprised that Labor would be out there defending John Howard's legacy, that in the 2000 election he handed around wadfuls of cash to people on very high incomes, and I was surprised with Labor's announcement. I think it was the wrong call. With regards to the retirement income review, the issue is this. We are now, through the tax white paper process, going to get a thorough examination of the issue of superannuation tax concessions. I accept the government is unlikely to act on those, but here's a blueprint for a future Labor government for them to be able to use and adopt. It lays the groundwork for them. It also lays the groundwork, should there be a change of Prime Minister in this government, to change tact on superannuation tax concessions, and we think that's an area that needs to be looked at. But you don't... Look, the partisanship involved here is just... It's silly. It doesn't do anyone any good. We've got a decent policy that increases the pensions for people at low income, or at the low end of the scale, and for people who have got a family home and over $1 million worth of assets, some of them will be worse off. But it's a much fairer system, and we just thought we're not going to let the partisanship get in the way here. The government's budget stinks on the main, but even a broken clock gets it right occasionally, and so we decided to back this measure. Labor
says 330,000 part pensioners will lose thousands. Michael O'Neill from Seniors Australia says he's concerned that single people who have $500,000 in assets, which is where the new threshold kicks in on top of the family home, will also lose access to the part pension. You're talking about lots of people here.
Well, the first thing to say is that groups like ACOS, the Australian Council of Social Services, CODA, the Council for the Ageing, they are all supportive of these measures, Uniting Care and so on. They have indicated that they think this makes the pension fairer. 170,000 people at the low end of the scale will benefit, on average, by $30 a fortnight. So the vast majority of people on pensions won't be affected. The great majority, there will be no change. For those people at the lower end of the scale, they will get a significant benefit. It's true that if you've got a family home, could be worth millions, as well as $1 million in assets.
If you're a couple, I'm talking about single people here. So we're not talking about millionaires when we talk to single pensioners.
What we're talking about is making the pension system fairer. And under this change, 170,000 people will be better off, and they are predominantly people at the lower end of the scale who have got very modest savings. And it's why a group like ACOS, whose mandate is to look after the most vulnerable members of the community, are supportive of changes to the pension. It's why we didn't support the pension changes in the last budget that would have affected everybody, particularly those on low incomes, and hit them hardest. But we didn't support the changes in 2007. We couldn't support them when Howard introduced them, and we couldn't be inconsistent and say, well, just because it's a terrible Abbott government that we're going to change our position. It is a measure that makes the system a lot fairer. We get the review into retirement incomes. We finally get superannuation back on the table. That's a good thing. We get to look at the entire issue of retirement income, because you don't want to just be looking at pensions in isolation. There are a lot of other factors that work here. So I think it's a good outcome for the community. I think that Labor's made a big mistake in not supporting it, and I felt I had an obligation to support what was one of the very, very few decent measures in the Abbott budget.
OK, you've done this deal on family tax benefits with the government. Are you now willing to look at the government's proposal to cut family tax benefits?
Sorry, we haven't done any deal on family tax benefits, but no, and that is one of the areas.
So you're ruling there's no concessions there?
Look, if it is as it currently stands, we will not be supporting a measure that takes money away from sole parents, and that's what the changes to family tax benefits do. I mean, and this is one of the problems with the budget, is that those measures are to fund childcare. We think some of the childcare measures are actually quite good, but they're going to be paid for by taking money away from sole parents. We won't support doing that.
And you've also been negotiating with the government over an increase in the fuel excise. Where are things on that with this current session about to expire?
We're still talking to the government. We've indicated that what we need to see is some significant investment in public transport. We need to ensure that if we are to reintroduce indexation of fuel, that it needs to fund the transformation that we need in terms of driving down pollution and addressing some of the regressive impacts of that. So we're talking to the government about that.
Just finally, very quickly, are you close to a deal on that?
No, I would say we're still in discussions.